You ever meet someone who thinks your stuff automatically belongs to them just because they live nearby? Yeah, that's Karen. Now, I'm not talking about the friendly kind of neighbor who borrows a cup of sugar or asks to use your lawnmower once in a while. I mean the type who walks around like the world is her personal property, armed with a clipboard and an inflated sense of power. That's who I was dealing with. But let's rewind a little. When I first moved into this neighborhood, I thought I had found my slice of paradise. Beautiful homes with crisp white fences, manicured lawns that could be on magazine covers, quiet streets where the loudest sound was the chirping of birds in the morning. And the best part? Private marina access for residents only. That was the real deal for me. I've worked hard my whole life. Long hours, stressful deadlines, endless stacks of paperwork. Buying a small yacht wasn't about showing off. It was about freedom. It was something I'd dreamed about since my early 20s, a symbol of what I'd earned through years of effort. After saving for years, I finally made it happen. I bought a 36-foot CRA, not a massive cruise liner or a flashy billionaire toy, just a comfortable, modest yacht perfect for weekend fishing trips, quiet evenings, or sunset cruises with a few friends. The first 6 months were everything I hoped for. My neighbors were friendly, the sunsets were breathtaking, and every weekend felt like a mini vacation. I'd sit on the deck with my golden retriever stretched out beside me, sipping a cold drink as the orange sun dipped below the horizon. I was living the dream, or so I thought. Then came the day that dream collided head-on with reality. And reality's name was Karen. She moved in 3 houses down. At first, she seemed harmless enough, overly cheerful, waving at everyone, asking too many questions about everything. But within a week, it became clear she wasn't just another neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. I've dealt with HOAs before, but Karen was something else entirely. She was like the final boss of entitlement. Oversized sunglasses, floral blouses, khaki capris, and that ever-present clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a weapon. She walked around inspecting driveways, measuring hedges, snapping pictures of mailboxes like she was collecting evidence for a crime scene. At first, I tried to be polite. I even told myself maybe she just wanted to keep the community looking good. I figured she'd calm down once she settled in. Oh, how wrong I was. The illusion shattered one warm Saturday morning. It was one of those peaceful days that make you forget about stress. The sky was clear. A soft breeze rippled through the marina, and my golden retriever, Max, was lazily dozing near the dock while I cleaned the deck of my yacht. Soft jazz music played from a speaker beside me, and I was humming along when I heard a voice behind me, sharp, clipped, and dripping with authority. "Excuse me." I turned around, squinting into the sun. There she was, Karen. She stood there in her khaki capris, floral blouse, and those oversized sunglasses that reflected the water like 2 judgmental mirrors. Clipboard in hand, posture straight, chin tilted slightly upward. The classic HOA starter pack. "Is this your boat?" she asked, her tone carrying that unmistakable mix of curiosity and accusation. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone light. "Just giving her a quick clean before heading out later." Karen nodded, eyes narrowing like she was assessing a crime scene. "You know, I'm the new HOA president." "Congratulations," I replied, smiling politely, hoping that would be the end of it. But instead, she gave me that kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that says, "I'm about to make your life difficult." "Well," she said, "I noticed your boat isn't listed on our HOA's amenity roster." My eyebrows furrowed. "Amenity roster?" "Yes," she said matter-of-factly, tapping her clipboard. "Boats docked at the marina technically fall under the community's shared space policy." I blinked, certain I'd misheard her. "Shared space?" She nodded again. "Which means when the community hosts events or guests, your yacht should be made available for use. Within reason, of course." I couldn't help it. I laughed. I genuinely thought she was joking. "Yeah, no, that's not how ownership works. This boat's fully registered under my name. It's private property." Her smile faltered, just a little. "Well, that's inconvenient," she said. "We're hosting a Welcome to Summer HOA party next weekend, and it would really elevate the event if guests could take photos and maybe enjoy a short ride." "Sorry," I said firmly. "That's not happening." She blinked, clearly unprepared for someone to tell her no. Her tone hardened. "Are you sure you want to take that stance? It wouldn't look good for you to be seen as uncooperative with the community. I shrugged. Guess I'll live with that. That's when I saw it, the change in her expression. That glare. You know the look people get right before they decide you're going to be their personal project of revenge? Yeah, that one. In that moment, I realized Karen wasn't just an overly ambitious HOA president. She was someone who needed control, who thrived on it. She didn't just want order. She wanted obedience, and I had just told her no. As she turned and walked away, I watched her scribble something on her clipboard, the corners of her mouth twitching. I didn't know it then, but that little note she wrote would be the first shot fired in a war I never asked for. For the rest of the day, I tried to shake it off. Took Max for a walk, went for a short ride on the water, grilled dinner on the deck as the sky turned pink. Everything felt calm again. But deep down, a thought lingered. People like Karen don't just let things go. I remember thinking, maybe she'll forget about it. Maybe it'll blow over. Spoiler alert, it didn't. That simple no I gave her would spiral into a full-blown HOA battle that would stretch for weeks, filled with fake fines, bogus violations, and an outrageous attempt to use my property as her personal party prop. But at that moment, as I leaned back in my chair and watched the sun set over the marina, I still thought I could handle it with patience. I didn't yet realize how far Karen would go, or how badly she'd underestimate who she was dealing with, because while she was planning her next move with that smug smile and clipboard, I had no idea that soon I'd be forced to use every ounce of my professional experience, every legal trick I knew, just to defend what was already mine. And that's where this nightmare began. The peace didn't last long. In fact, it barely made it through the next week. It started with a letter, folded neatly, slipped under my front door like some kind of polite threat. At first glance, it looked official. HOA letterhead, formal language, a crisp signature at the bottom. But the content, that's what made me laugh out loud. Notice of nonconformity. Your boat cover color does not meet HOA aesthetic standards. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds, confused. My boat cover was navy blue, the same color as half the boats in the marina. How could that possibly violate anything? I shrugged it off, tossed the letter on the counter, and went about my day. But 2 days later, another envelope showed up. Dock ropes are visible from the common walkway. Please correct immediately. Now I was annoyed. The ropes? They were supposed to be visible. That's literally how you tie a boat to a dock. Then came the third one, and that's when I knew. Your marina usage fees are past due. Except I had the receipt sitting in my files, dated months earlier. 3 complaints in 1 week, each more ridiculous than the last. There was no question who was behind this. Karen had declared war. At first, I tried to ignore it. The reasonable part of me said it wasn't worth engaging. But the thing about HOA presidents like Karen is they thrive on intimidation. They rely on wearing you down until you give in just to shut them up, and I wasn't about to be worn down. Then one morning, I walked outside and found a bright orange paper taped to my front door. My stomach dropped. Official HOA violation notice. Unauthorized private use of community dock space. Immediate compliance required. There it was, the big one. The threat she'd been building up to. I took the paper, read it twice, then smiled. All right, Karen, I muttered. Let's play. See, what Karen didn't know was that she'd picked a fight with the wrong homeowner. I've spent 15 years working in property law for a utility company. I know easements, access rights, HOA charters, zoning restrictions, all of it. I could quote bylaws in my sleep, so instead of arguing, I decided to fight her in the only language she understood, paperwork. I started by drafting an official request to the HOA board, citing state homeowner protection statutes that required full transparency. I requested copies of the HOA charter, the marina bylaws, and all documents related to property and dock use. By law, they had 5 business days to comply. I sent it certified mail, because when you're dealing with people like Karen, every detail counts. Then I waited. On the 5th day, I got an envelope delivered to my door. Inside was a thick stack of photocopied documents, stamped and signed. I spent that evening going through every line with a red pen, highlighting anything that seemed remotely relevant. By midnight, I'd found what I was looking for. Nowhere, absolutely nowhere, did it say that privately owned boats could be considered shared assets. In fact, I found the opposite. Section 8.3 of the HOA Charter stated clearly that the HOA holds no ownership rights over resident-owned vehicles, watercraft, or personal property. I actually laughed out loud. It was right there in black and white. Karen had no legal ground to stand on. None. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't just about a yacht. It was about power. Karen wanted to prove she could control everyone around her, even when the rules said otherwise. So I made a decision. I wasn't just going to clear my name. I was going to make her regret ever trying to push me around. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. The moment I walked into that community center, I could feel the tension. A few neighbors smiled politely, but most kept their eyes down, avoiding any appearance of taking sides. Karen sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by board members. Her perfume hit me before her voice did, a thick, sweet cloud that could probably knock out a horse. She looked up from her clipboard and said, "Ah, Mr. Anderson, good to see you joining us." I smiled back. Wouldn't miss it. The meeting started as usual, updates about landscaping, maintenance schedules, and budget reviews. I sat quietly, waiting for my moment. Then, during the community concerns portion, I raised my hand. "Karen," I said, "about those repeated notices and fines regarding my boat." Her smile froze. "Yes?" "I've reviewed the HOA bylaws," I continued calmly, pulling a thick binder from my briefcase. I flipped to a page I'd highlighted in yellow. According to Section 8.3, privately owned watercraft are exempt from HOA control. Also, the marina lease agreement I signed grants exclusive use rights for my assigned dock. Would you like me to read it aloud? The room went silent. All eyes turned to her. Karen blinked, then forced a small laugh. Well, that's interesting. But surely you still want to support your community, right? Sharing resources, building togetherness. I closed the binder slowly. I already do that, by paying my HOA dues on time and not misusing community funds. Her pen stopped mid-scribble. Her jaw tightened. A few board members exchanged awkward glances. One of them cleared his throat and said, "Well, it seems Mr. Anderson has a point. If that's what the bylaws say, we should probably review the notices issued." Karen's smile didn't just fade. It cracked. She scribbled something on her clipboard furiously, pretending to take notes. The rest of the meeting was painfully quiet. Every time she tried to shift the topic, someone would bring up bylaws or clarification. You could almost see the frustration pulsing behind her sunglasses. By the time it ended, she looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. I walked up afterward, gave her a polite nod, and said, "Appreciate your time, Madam President." She didn't reply. That night I drove home with my windows down, the salty wind whipping through my hair, feeling victorious. I thought that was the end of it, that I'd finally put her in her place. But I underestimated her, because while I slept peacefully, Karen was already planning her next move. And her next move would make the violation letters look like child's play. She wasn't just angry anymore, she was humiliated. And people like Karen? They don't forgive humiliation. They find new ways to assert control, even if it means crossing lines they can't uncross. And soon, she'd do exactly that, because 2 weeks later I'd wake up to find strangers partying on my yacht. It was a Saturday morning, calm, quiet, the kind of morning when you expect to hear nothing but seagulls and the distant hum of waves against the docks. I brewed a cup of coffee, stepped outside, and admired the sunlight glinting off my boat, the Liberty. She was docked right where she belonged, rocking gently with the tide. That's when I noticed something strange. Music. Not the soft hum of a radio or someone's phone speaker. This was loud. Thumping bass, people laughing, glasses clinking. It sounded like a party, and it was coming from the direction of my boat. I frowned, walked faster, and the closer I got, the clearer it became. There were people on my yacht, at least a dozen of them, balloons tied to the rails, tables covered in snacks. Someone even brought a minibar, and right there, Standing at the bow with a glass of champagne in hand was none other than Karen. She was dressed in a white sun hat and oversized sunglasses, holding court like she was queen of the marina. For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. Then I shouted, "What the hell is this?" The music lowered slightly and a few people turned. Karen froze mid-sip. "Oh, Mr. Anderson," she said, pretending to be surprised. "Didn't realize you'd be home this early." "Home this early?" I repeated, incredulous. "This is my yacht, Karen. What are you doing on it?" She gave a delicate laugh, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We're just having a little HOA mixer. You should be thanking me. It's great publicity for the community." My hands clenched around the railing. "You broke into my boat." Her smile stiffened. "Technically, the marina is HOA property." "Technically," I said, stepping closer, "you're trespassing. And I can prove it." A few of her guests started whispering, uncomfortable. Someone quickly set down their drink and stepped off onto the dock. The music died completely. Karen's eyes darted toward them. "Everyone, it's fine. He's just misunderstanding the situation." "No," I said sharply. "You're misunderstanding the law." She gave a tight smile. "You wouldn't call the police on your neighbors, would you?" "Try me." Her face flickered, but she tried to recover. "Fine," she huffed, setting her glass down. "If you want to be that way, we'll leave. But I'll be reporting this to the board. You're being uncooperative with HOA activities." I almost laughed. The nerve. "Get off my boat, Karen." 10 minutes later, the party was over. The balloons popped, the tables cleared, and the self-appointed queen stormed off the dock, heels clicking like gunshots. But even as I watched her leave, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot, because Karen didn't like losing, and humiliation in her world was a declaration of war. That night, I received a new notice in my mailbox. It read, "You are hereby fined $5,000 for unauthorized obstruction of community events." I almost choked. $5,000? For stopping her from breaking into my yacht? I didn't even bother calling her. I went straight to the HOA board. The next meeting, I walked in with a manila folder thick with evidence, photos of the party, videos from the dock's security camera, even audio from a neighbor who'd recorded the noise complaint. Karen sat at the table again, pretending to look composed, but I could tell she was nervous. When it was my turn to speak, I dropped the folder on the table. It landed with a satisfying thud. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "I believe this constitutes trespassing, property damage, and illegal misuse of HOA authority." The board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a tall guy named Paul who rarely spoke, finally said, "Karen, did you authorize this event?" Karen smiled too quickly. "It was a misunderstanding. I assumed the yacht was community property." "Stop!" I cut her off, opening one of the documents. "Here's the marina contract. Here's my deed. Here's Section 8.3 of the HOA Charter again. Still says the same thing. You had no right to touch my property." The room fell silent. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Then I pulled out my phone and played the video. Karen laughing, champagne in hand, saying, "Technically, the marina is HOA property." The sound filled the room. Her face turned crimson. The board chair cleared his throat. "This is very concerning." I folded my arms. "Concerning? It's criminal. If I wanted to press charges, I could. But for now, I'm only asking for her removal as HOA president and full nullification of the bogus fine she issued." Karen opened her mouth to object, but Paul spoke again, firmer this time. "He's right. This isn't leadership, it's abuse of power." Another member nodded. Then another. The chair looked around, sighed, and finally said, "All in favor of removing Karen as HOA president pending review?" Hands went up. 4 out of 5. Karen's eyes widened. "You can't do this!" "It's already done," Paul said quietly. And just like that, her reign ended. Or so I thought, because Karen didn't go quietly. No, she left that meeting with one last promise. As she passed by me, she leaned in close and whispered, "You'll regret this." Then she walked out, heels echoing like thunder. For a few weeks, things went back to normal. The letters stopped. The marina was peaceful again. I'd almost forgotten about her. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a faint noise outside. At first, I thought it was the wind, until I saw the glow. Orange, flickering, moving, fire. I bolted upright, ran outside barefoot, and froze. My dock was ablaze, flames licking the water, smoke rising into the night sky. And the Liberty, my yacht, was already burning. "Call 911, I shouted to a neighbor who had come running. We sprayed water with garden hoses, but it was useless. Within minutes, the entire yacht was engulfed. The fire department arrived fast, but by then it was too late. The Liberty was gone. When the flames finally died, I stood there staring at the smoldering wreckage, the acrid smell of burnt fiberglass in the air. My chest felt hollow. The fire chief approached me. "Any enemies, sir?" I looked at him, the word bitter on my tongue. "Yeah," I said quietly. "One," he sighed. "We'll investigate, but arson like this takes planning," I nodded. "I know." That night, as I watched the ashes of my boat drift across the dark water, I made myself a promise. I was done playing defense. Karen had taken this too far. It wasn't just about HOA politics anymore. It was about justice, and I was going to make sure she faced it, one way or another. Because if Karen thought she could burn away her mistakes, she was about to find out that fire doesn't just destroy, it exposes, and what it exposed next would change everything. The morning after the fire felt unreal. My marina, once peaceful and pristine, now looked like a war zone. Ash floated across the water like black snow. The smell of burnt fiberglass hung heavy in the air, and the twisted remains of the Liberty still smoldered beneath the dock. Neighbors gathered along the shoreline, whispering, shaking their heads. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone had a theory. But I didn't need one. Deep down, I knew exactly who was responsible. Karen. The same woman who had trespassed on my boat. The same woman who had been humiliated in front of the entire HOA board. She'd made a promise. "You'll regret this." And now, standing there, staring at the wreckage, I finally understood what she meant. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. By the afternoon, investigators from the fire department and insurance company arrived. They roped off the dock and started taking samples. The lead investigator, a calm man named Davis, approached me. "Mr. Anderson," he said, flipping through his notepad, "we've determined this wasn't an electrical fire." I folded my arms. "You're saying it was arson?" He nodded slowly. "We found traces of accelerant near the fuel line. Someone poured something flammable before it went up." My jaw tightened. "And you have no suspects?" "Not yet," he said, but I could tell he already suspected what I did. "If you can think of anyone who might hold a grudge, anyone who's been in conflict with you—" "Yeah," I interrupted. "I can think of one." That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my laptop screen, pulling every HOA email, every text, every photo, every letter. I built a timeline, dates, messages, board meetings, Karen's fines, the party, the confrontation, her removal, and finally, the fire. Then I noticed something interesting. A day before the fire, Karen had sent an email to the HOA board, requesting temporary reauthorization for marina access to coordinate repairs. The board chair had denied it. But the timestamp on her request, just 12 hours before the blaze. It was too much to be coincidence. I printed everything, compiled it in a folder, and walked it straight to Investigator Davis the next morning. He reviewed the documents carefully, eyebrows furrowed. "You've done half our work for us," he muttered. "We'll issue a subpoena for her phone records." Within a week, the truth came out. Karen's phone pinged near the marina at 1:43 a.m., 17 minutes before the first flames were reported. Security footage from a nearby camera caught her car headlights pulling into the lot. Then, leaving in a hurry around 2 a.m., she tried to claim she was just going for a late-night drive, but the accelerant found matched, a brand of cleaning fluid she'd purchased at a local hardware store earlier that day, on her HOA expense card. When the investigators confronted her, she broke. She tried to spin it, saying it was an accident, that she'd gone down to inspect the docks, and that maybe a fuel leak had ignited. But her story fell apart fast. The audit I'd triggered weeks earlier revealed she'd been reimbursing herself for unauthorized expenses, falsifying invoices and covering her tracks with fake signatures. When the police showed up to arrest her, half the neighborhood stood outside watching. She wore her sunglasses like armor, pretending she wasn't embarrassed, but her voice trembled as she tried to argue with the officers. "This is a misunderstanding," she shouted. "He's framing me!" No one believed her. The HOA released an official statement 2 days later. "We deeply regret the actions of former President Karen Shaw, whose conduct violated both HOA and state law. We are cooperating fully with authorities and working to rebuild community trust." It felt surreal seeing her name in the paper, especially under a headline that read, "HOA President Arrested in Arson Investigation." But justice wasn't instant. The insurance claim dragged on for months, and replacing the Liberty wasn't easy. Still, I wasn't interested in the money anymore. I wanted closure. When the trial finally began, I testified calmly, presenting every document, every photo, every message. Karen sat across the courtroom, refusing to look at me. Her lawyer tried to paint it as an emotional breakdown, an act of desperation after losing her position. But the evidence spoke for itself. Accelerant traces, security footage, financial fraud. In the end, the jury took less than 2 hours to deliberate. Guilty on all counts: arson, property damage, and fraud. She was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, plus restitution for the damages. When the judge read the verdict, Karen finally looked up, her eyes wide, her face pale. There was no smirk this time, no clipboard, no sunglasses to hide behind. Just the cold realization that her empire of control had collapsed. Afterward, several neighbors came up to me, apologizing for ever supporting her. Paul from the board shook my hand. "You did the right thing," he said. "She fooled us all," I smiled faintly. "She fooled herself most of all." A few months later, the marina was restored. The charred planks were replaced, the water cleared, and I bought a new boat, slightly smaller but perfect. I named her the Phoenix. The first time I took her out, the sun was setting, casting a golden path across the water. The marina was quiet again, peaceful. No more clipboard checks, no more fake fines, no more parties I didn't authorize. Just me, the sound of the waves, and the feeling of freedom. I leaned back on the deck, looked at the sky, and thought about how quickly people can turn power into poison. How some HOA presidents forget they're supposed to protect their community, not control it. Karen's downfall wasn't just about arrogance, it was about boundaries. She believed that proximity meant ownership, that living near something gave her a right to it. But she forgot one simple truth. Respect isn't written in the bylaws, it's earned, and that's something she'll have 5 long years to think about. As for me, I rebuilt stronger than before. My neighbors learned to stand up for themselves. The new HOA president, a level-headed guy named Paul, banned private board reimbursements and introduced community transparency meetings. The place actually started feeling like a community again. Now, whenever I walk past that dock and see the Phoenix glimmering in the sun, I smile. Not because I won, but because I didn't let her destroy the thing I loved. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting, it's living better than the people who tried to tear you down, and that, my friends, is how one HOA Karen learned the hard way that not everything belongs to her, especially when it's someone else's yacht. So, if you ever find yourself dealing with an entitled neighbor who thinks your property is their playground, remember, knowledge is power, evidence is protection, and karma always sails back home. And that wraps up today's wild story here on HOA Story Files, where real homeowners fight back and entitled Karens finally get what's coming to them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to help the channel grow. Because trust me, we've got plenty more HOA nightmares coming your way. Until next time, keep your docs locked, your paperwork ready, and your peace protected.